Hey, quick question. When I'm sharing my slides, am I going to be able to see on this view, the slide that's showing up like I see your slide?
You'll be able to see them on the main screen. Do you have two monitors?
I do have two monitors.
Okay, so what I have one in front of me and then one with the slides on the side. So that's where the one I'm sharing from is on my right side.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Hello, everyone, and I would like to thank you for joining us for 30 Seconds Sold Crafting Success Stories That Convert with Leslie Ramey. My name is Christopher Howard, and I am the Senior Web Marketing Developer here at Consensus, and I will be your moderator for today's session. DEMOFEST is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or view the automated micro demo link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. Consensus is proud to provide this event free to all attendees. However, we would like to invite each of you to donate to our company's humanitarian organizations if you would like to. You can learn more about this and donate by visiting the DEMOFEST Gives Back booth in our virtual expo hall in the Booths tab or using the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. We invite you to join our DEMOFEST community on Discord. Our community is where you can connect with speakers, get exclusive access to content and events, and where the conversation will continue long after the DEMOFEST event has ended. We encourage all attendees to join us and so many others. You can join the community using the link in the Docs tab. We also encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right side of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. The chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as the other attendees. I'm stuck. Throughout the session, you will also see a few polls. We encourage you to participate as your feedback is important to us. Our speaker will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session, but we encourage you to ask questions at any time throughout the QA or throughout the session using the QA box. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, click the gear icon at the bottom of your screen. And here you will see a help document to help troubleshoot any common issues. And with that said, I would like to introduce our speaker. Leslie Ramey is a senior solutions consultant for Botify. She is a natural storyteller who thrives on connecting the dots between what we need and how that translates into business value. Working in pre-sales has allowed her to continue her understanding of how human behavior impacts the sales process. Striving to apply these learnings, she has successfully closed record-breaking enterprise-level deals. And with that said, I turn the rest of my time over to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that introduction. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next session of DEMOFEST. I'm excited to be here with you. Let's get that screen sharing. Make sure you guys drop questions into the comments in the section throughout this process. I don't want to wait till the end, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Let's get started. Perfect. So welcome to 30 Seconds to Sold. Crafting success stories that convert. One of the things that you're going to learn in this session is that I love language, and alliteration is one of my favorite tools. So there'll be lots of those, but it's also really important when we're talking about success stories. Perfect. 1 second there. I went too fast, too excited. Way too early. Let's roll this down. All right, guys. So quick 30 seconds to say hello. As Chris mentioned, my name is Leslie Ramey. I'm the Director of Solutions Consulting at US. In the US, recently got a promotion, so that's exciting for me. But what's really great is I work with Botify, and we are a SaaS software company designed to really open, using the full funnel methodology to open up organic traffic and access that. And so one of the things that we do often is have complicated conversations with people who may not have all the know about all the knowledge and all the information that we have. So one of the ways that we can do that is with success stories. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So on our agenda today is we're going to first talk a little bit about social proof and B2B and how those elements are still really important. Often we think of social proof when we're making consumer decisions, but also from a B2B standpoint, leadership also needs to know that the decisions they're making is what's best for them. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to really dive into this concept of success stories. What is a success story? How do you build them? Where can you find them currently within your clients, your marketing materials? How can you create more of those? Really getting down to training your team. How can you get them excited and getting them to use these elements? When to use them. And then, of course, at the end is questions. So please make sure that you drop questions in as we're getting in and diving into all of this great stuff here. The first thing I kind of wanted to talk about is why are we talking about success stories and where do they kind of lie in this? As you guys know, December tends to be a really busy time up until Christmas. And then those last 2 weeks of the year, it's all lay back and relax and just kind of catch up. I like to use that time to really dive in and clean up my email and organize my files and get ready for the new year because I'm that kind of a nerd. But this year, something very cool happened. Sort of. We brought in a new CRO and wanted to revamp this idea of success stories and wanted to do that especially for our sales kickoff. And so I was tasked with this idea of taking these complicated success stories that we've been using in the past and simplifying them and making sure they're landing in a new way. And one of the things that we learned about this is, one, it's very hard to do. And we'll talk about some of the challenges to doing that. But two, we also want to talk about the importance and the value that is driven and why it makes sense to take the time to put in this work because it lands really well. And we're having these conversations with leaderships, or even when you're in an elevator, this is exactly what you need in order to do those quick pitches so that you can move your sales further on in that process and get people excited about what you're doing. So with that said, let's dive on in. So the first area we're going to talk about is really that social proof in the B2B sales. So 65% of B2B sales are impacted by social proof. This shouldn't be a surprise. All of us at the end of the day have to look at people in our networks, people that we talk to, people we work with, just to really trust what we're doing is making the right decision for our business. And really the way that social proof is going to help you is in 5 key areas. First, you're really going to build trust and credibility. At the end of the day, we've all heard this. We're all in conversations. We're all talking to people. And someone always says, that's great. We've seen these numbers. That's what the last salespeople told us. But is it really going to work for us? Is it really going to have the payout? Should we invest that time? And really, social proof is going to provide that evidence. Providing case studies, success stories, those elements are critical to making sure that the data that you're providing them, the stories you're telling them are accurate and they can believe that it can be effective for them as well. The next area is really risk reduction. At the end of the day, somebody's name is on that line. At the end of the day, if they can't get the results that you've promised them, they're going to be nervous and really uncomfortable. But if you can go back to them and be like, this has worked for A, B, and C companies, why can't it work for you? That helps relieve that risk a lot more, and it's going to be easier to close that deal. And risk reduction is probably one of those things that's going to be really powerful as we're moving into this new year, and more people are rolling back how much money they're willing to spend for their marketing, for their outreach, for improving their site. So it's going to be critical for us to make sure that we remove that risk for them. And if we can do that with social proof using these examples, then that's all the better for us. Another really important way is validation and fear of missing out. Still big issues with us. A lot of leaderships, a lot of people have these ideas. And they're like, if we make this change, we believe this will help us. Having social proof, looking at case studies where that has been successful for them, again, opens that door. It feels good when you know you're on the right path. And this is one of those ways that you can really start to get that validation. And fear of missing out. If others are doing it and having success, again, we're opening those doors, and that's really powerful. Really a great opportunity to differentiate yourself and provide a competitive advantage. What have you done that your competitors have not been able to do? What successes have you placed that your competitors have not done? And how have you really worked with your clients, with your prospects, and really engage with them and make them successful? And lastly, and most important, of course, for us in our world, is all about shortening that sales cycle. If the faster that we get things through, the better. The more people we can help, the more clients we got coming through, the happier everyone is. And social proof is really impactful in making sure that that moves us in the right direction. Interesting here is that 88% of marketers believe that case studies are the most effective form of content marketing. We know that they're valuable, and case studies do provide a lot of really great information. This is an example of a case study by my marketing team who I adore. And this has everything you love in a case study. I mean, look at those stats. Big numbers, a good explanation. It's short, it's easy to get through, but it provides you with the information that's really important and necessary for people to make decisions. It's giving them social proof with data that represents it. But the question really comes down to, who's reading those case studies? I actually did some research, and this was really interesting to me, is I could not find any data to say how often leadership actually reads case studies before making decisions. And that was a little surprising. And granted, it's a little bit hard to track, but at the same time, shouldn't we be knowing this? Shouldn't we be finding out whether the effort and the work that goes into creating a case study is actually doing some payoffs? I did an informal poll of my sales team at the company just to get their thoughts. How effective are case studies? How often are people using them? Does this make sense for us to continue to kind of move in this arena? They all overwhelmingly said that case studies are powerful. So we've got marketing that believe in it, we've got sales believing it, and they're right, but it all has to come at that time. No one's going to open a case study in a cold email. No one's going to read a case study if they're not really engaged and willing to invest the time in whatever it is that you're trying to sell them, anything you're trying to educate them about. So it's all about timing when it comes to case studies. So the question becomes well, how do we make sure that we're providing this information with them when they aren't ready, when they aren't necessarily ready to sign in that dotted line? And that, my friends, is where we come in with success stories. Now, this is an example of a case of a success story that we would put in a presentation. But the way that success stories work is it's a 30-second bite-sized information about whatever the story is, whatever the problem you're trying to solve, and it's delivered in a great way that's easy to digest, it's clear and simplified, and really ends with a strong question. So give me 1 second. Take a long, deep breath, because I'm going to give you an example of how this success story goes, just so you guys get an idea of what this looks like. So if you've got a watch, want to time me, I'm down for that challenge. If it's more than 30 seconds, shh, don't tell anyone. It'll just be our secret. But here's what it is. That's an interesting that you have such a large site. We've actually recently worked with a big multimedia site with over 50 million URLs. And what we found is that over 10 million revenue driving pages were not driving traffic because Google couldn't see them. Using analytics, we were able to identify the most strategic pages and deliver them directly to the search engines, which resulted in a massive improvement of traffic and over 150% increase in the number of visitors coming to the site. Now, when you think about your website, how much of that is Google actually seeing? And I'm going to pause there and let that sink in for a second. See how that leading question kind of ended it, kind of took a pause, we kind of thought about it. Now we've got something that we can actually have a conversation with anywhere, whether or not we're having a cup of coffee, whether we're on an elevator, whether we're in a car trading with someone, or doing a cold email. We've taken this complicated case study, turned it into a 30-second time slot, and then delivered it in such a way that people are like, well, what is happening with my website? How many pages is Google seeing it? And can I drive traffic to those pages if I didn't know about it? This is really the power of success stories and why they're so important. And so now we're going to start to dive into how we can create those elements, and then you guys can start to work on them. Perfect. So let's first start talking about the key components of a success story. First, we need to target to a specific audience. Now, in our example first, we're looking at the example that I just gave you as high-level VP, C-suite people that are really looking at the end of the day, how are you going to drive revenue? How are you going to drive traffic? What is going to be at the end of the day that's going to make my company run more efficiently and more effectively? Now, what's nice about this is that you can create success stories for multiple groups. Definitely have the C-suite people where the level is going to be higher, where you're really talking about, at the end of the day, what traffic are you driving? What revenue are you driving? What is the end result of the work you're doing? But also use your users. Your users have a different level of language that they need to understand. And though being able to target those more complicated terms makes sense to them because they understand that, oh, I need these elements in order to be successful. So creating an audience targeting for those specifically can have a lot of power. Then you're able to work in between them depending on who you're talking to in your sales cycle. The next area is really only focus on one challenge per story. We know that every time we do something or we bring something in that there's lots of benefits, and those benefits are really helpful, especially when we're talking about encompassing the entire company and how we can use what we provide in multiple different departments. Because the more they use you, the more they're keeping you around, the less churn you have to worry about, right? But for this, we really want to focus on one challenge per story. What have you learned in your discovery that's saying, man, this is going to be really effective for them? This is something they've been working on. Or, hey, they hadn't even thought about this, but I think this could change things for them. That's where we want to really keep that simple on that one challenge per story. The next area is to break it down in the issue in simple language. And this is where we're talking about my love of language. It can be challenging. The hardest part of your success stories is going to be breaking things down into simple language. We take for granted as solutions consultants all of our knowledge. We know a lot about a lot of things, and it can be very technical. And we also know that that's technical nuances are critically important when we're talking about implementing or making changes, because everything we touch is going to impact everything else, and we know this. But at the end of the day, when we're talking to leadership, when we're talking to people who have to make decisions very quickly, we have to simplify that. So in my example where we were talking about delivering pages to search engines very quickly, increasing their strategic value, all of that information, we stripped out lots of things like rendering, JavaScript, crawl budget. All of this information is really important when we're talking about how we're going to communicate this information. So simplifying it is really important. And we're going to break this down. And we're going to show you an example of how we kind of break these scripts out later on in the presentation. So the next area is really as a brief explanation of the capability, service, or the product provided. So not only have we kind of mentioned what we did in a simple way, but we have to really say is what did we do to do it? How did we make that improvement? What change did we add in order to create and provide that, that change? And last, this is probably one of the most important elements. Not only do we need to simplify our language, but it needs to be delivered in under 30 seconds. Right now, 8 seconds is the attention span of an American. 30 seconds is asking a lot of them. But you want to grab their attention with, hey, we've seen something very similar, and we think we can help you. 2, this is how we fixed it for somebody else. And 3, this was the value that we drove with it. Finally, ending up with that question is, what will this change for you? How will this impact the way that you approach your business if you had these success and these changes? So we'll go ahead and come on back to this. We looked at this slide, and this was kind of that front slide that you can incorporate into all of your decks that you're putting together, or any sort of a one-pager that you want to use. This is one way to do it. But at the back side, this is where we're going to start to break down how we dive into each of these elements and how we make those changes. So the first one is really talking about your person. Who are we talking to? Again, we're talking high level here, make multiples there. The company that we're actually creating the success story for. What do they do? These don't have to be specific. You don't have to call out a specific name. Just talk about in general terms. That way we don't have to worry about violating any NDAs or any issues like that. But in general, what is the company? What is that vertical looking like? This is really important, especially when you're talking about apples to apples. You want to be able to compare these sites to each other. The next one we want to do is that high-level explanation of the challenge. In this example, we've got those 10 million revenue-driving URLs, not driving traffic. And this, we're really talking, again, simplifying things down. What is at the base of what we're talking about, and how are we going to remedy that? And this is where we do that solve the problem. And again, this will be the hardest part of what you guys do. There is a lot of, as I mentioned, nuance in everything that we do, especially, so I come from an organic background, search engine optimization, SEO, and everything comes down to it depends. It depends on how it's implemented. It depends on whether or not the bots are seeing it. It depends on all these elements, and all of those are really important. But at the end of the day, to leadership, it doesn't matter to them. What they need to know is, what does it change? What is the impact, and how is that going to move business for them on a regular basis? What was the result? This is where the data is going to be really helpful. This is where pulling information from your case studies can be really powerful, because now we're looking at what the data is. What did we drive in revenue? What was that value? And then the last most important element is really this leading question. How does this relate to them? Now, the challenge here is making sure that it is an open-ended question. We don't want yes or no answers. We want them to think about this, and not only think about it how they are in their current position, but what could this mean for them? Let this be an inspiration. Let this start to work in a way that you can start to think about, how can we be better at this for them? And then let them get excited about it, because this is how we open those doors. This is how we get them back to being like, man, if we had this much more, how would that look at dollars and revenue for us? Perfect. And so that's the key components of those success stories. And we're going to go through them a little bit more, because when part of this training process is part of the educating, getting people moving forward here. So this is the outline script for you guys. And the reason you're going to see something that looks a little odd, right? We see all capital letters where person, company, challenge, capabilities, provide, all of this. This is actually a technique that's used to help people memorize things. When you create a script and every time they see this, their brain automatically starts to adjust in such a way so that they're able to remember that, oh, I'm supposed to start learning this. Oh, I'm start to memorizing this. So this is actually a technique that you're going to want to use to help train the rest of your team as they're starting to implement these success stories. You know, who is that audience? What is the industry or vertical? What challenge, capabilities we provide? Outcome, follow up. Remember that open-ended question is super important in order to make things moving forward for you guys. I'm going to leave this here for just a little bit longer because I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to screen grab that or take down those notes, because this, again, if you keep this format, it's going to simplify this process. All right. I am talking way too fast and this is going too quickly. So I'm going to try and slow down a little bit, or you guys need to ask a lot more questions. So let's talk about the simplification of language. As I mentioned before, this is the hardest part of this process. Talking about rendering, JavaScript, CDNs, complicated coding is something that we live in every day. This is where we exist, but our leadership doesn't exist there. And it's not fair for us to assume that they have to be there. They have a lot to do. They have a lot on their plate. They pay us in order to do this for them so that we can provide them with with solutions that are going to be impactful for them. So I want to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about why we need to simplify that language. Leaderships do not know what you know. They just don't. And that's not reasonable, as I mentioned, for us to expect them to. You know, I up until this point, before December happened, I was of the opinion that they should know at least a little bit of this stuff, because it's the end of the day, it's how they're making money, it's how they're bringing stuff in. But when I did a further research and started to look at what that looks like for leadership, they really just don't have the time. Their responsibility is to make sure that everything is moving forward, and they're trusting their teams that are giving them the right information so they can do this. So it's our job to simplify this, to break language down into its core basis. When I was practicing, like when I was creating the case studies for Botify for our sales kickoff, I always was kind of thinking, like, what is the core components of this element that I can then translate it into simple, like, blocks, doors closed, things opening, delivery faster, all about bringing it down to, at the end of the day, what does this mean? One of the things you guys can work on, and I encourage you to do this, is that this should really be done in groups, in training, like talking back and forth. And I actually did this a lot with our CORO, Charlie, for this reason, because I would come and be like, how do you simplify JavaScript isn't running properly, and as a result, Google's not finding your links? And he's like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, it's what I just told you. He's like, no, why is that important? And it's all about breaking it down to being like, oh, Google can't read what's on the page, and as a result, they can't find the rest of the pages. So it's all about making sure that what we're talking about is clear so that anybody can understand it, because if they can understand it, then they can start to make the decisions that are going to be most impactful and helpful for them. Simplification does not take away from your credibility. So that was another thing that I really struggled with, is like, but I know these big fancy words. I worked really hard to learn these big fancy words. I should be able to show off my big fancy words. Well, we can show off our big fancy words to each other, but let's keep those down and keep it simplified, because again, at the end of the day, they don't have the time or necessarily the energy to dive deep into some of these rabbit holes that where we exist, where we live, where we love. Doesn't take it away. It doesn't make you any less knowledgeable or helpful. What it really does is actually make you more helpful, because now they're going to be able to take this simplified language and share it with others, and it's going to make everyone look stronger at the end of the day. The necessary thing is, yes, everything depends, but does it really? I know in SEO world, it depends is where we live, and that is a struggle for a lot of reasons, because when we go to leadership and say we want to do something, they're like, well, how much money can it bring? If we start with it depends, well, that conversation is a stop point. Yes, there are lots of dependencies. And yes, it's important to know those, but you don't have to relay them to leadership. They don't need to know all these other contingencies. They just need to have faith that you know what they are and you can manage them. At the end of the day, they just need to know what language should we be using, or what information is most helpful. How can we move this forward? Does that make sense? Does that feel better for everyone? Kind of that simplifying. You guys are going to understand this a lot once you start doing these, I promise. And if at any point you want to pop into LinkedIn and be like, how can I simplify this? I'm happy to help you with that, because that is the hardest part of making success stories, is really making it as simple as possible. All right. So the next question is, where do we find your data for your stories? Marketing teams are incredibly busy. They're always working on things, moving forward, getting case studies done, building out reports, creating blog content. Reality is, case studies take a lot of time. They're slow because they're in depth and they require a lot of effort going into them. So waiting for them can be challenging. So where else can we find data so that we can start to craft these stories while we're waiting for them? So for some of those examples would be in blog articles. There's lots of really great data points where blogs highlighted an anecdote or a story where it was really powerful. That information can be quickly turned into a success story where we can relay it in 30 seconds. Again, it's all about having that communication and being able to share that. Customer reviews. These are also really great. When people talk about how successful they are with your product, then this is definitely one of those opportunities where they're going to be able to turn that information into a success story, bringing that data point in, talking about how powerful things can be for your customers. These are great success stories. Business reviews. And in this business review, it's really when your organization is reaching out to your current customers and you're talking about all the work you did them for the year, those quarterly business reviews, those yearly business reviews. What have you done for them? What stats have you moved? Those are all right pickings for success stories. That's data that we're looking at. You're targeting a specific industry. You've uncovered a problem. You've solved the problem, and now you have your results. All of this builds up pretty quickly. So one of the things I'd encourage you guys to do is plan a quarterly review of your data to create new success stories. The more information you have, the more data you have to work from, the easier it will be to share these out. And when you have a small section, it gets old. Going through the same data over and over and over again, having the same success stories gets a little tiring from our point of view. Sure, it may be the client's first time or the prospect's first time hearing this, but we've already said it 15 times. Let's find some new stories. And this is some of those areas and opportunities that you can actually identify those success stories and opportunities. Perfect. All right. So the next area we want to talk about here is getting everyone ready to use your success stories. Now, this is a big opportunity. This isn't something that just the solutions teams can be. This is sales. This is CSMs. This is BDRs, this is outreach. All of these groups have an opportunity to be exposed to a prospect in a way that they can start delivering this information to them. So we really want to start training them and get them excited about this. So again, who should get trained? Everyone. Anyone who's talking to a prospect or a client, learning how to do success stories is going to be really helpful, especially if you think about this really from the idea of those elevator pitch. It's a 30-second soundbite they're giving to someone that's leaving them with a question that's going to be circling in their head long after that interaction with you. That question is going to be really powerful later on when they're getting ready to go to bed and they're thinking about their day and they're like, hey, wait, how much of my site is Google seeing? Maybe I should ask somebody about that. That's really why training everybody in your team, in your organization to be successful with success stories is going to be really powerful for you. Where, when to practice. So this is going to be a little bit different from others. While you and I are doing this kind of session here where we're talking about it, I would not encourage you to do success stories this format. It needs to be everyone on screen. There needs to be a level of role play. And that's really important because there needs to be practice. The first few rounds of people in a room reading through the success stories is going to sound like a really bad play read. Everyone's sitting around a table reading their script. It's going to sound clunky. It's going to sound awkward. They're going to stress the wrong parts of the story or wrong elements. And you're just going to be like, this sounds awful. None of us are going to get hired for this TV series. Let's find new jobs. But those practices are really important. Having that feedback is going to help people ensure that they're going to get the information that they need so that they can deliver it well. The next thing is ready, set, go. 30 seconds. That's what we're talking about here. That's the time that you want to be able to deliver all this information. You're going to be talking about a lot of information from where the industry is, what the problem was, how it was solved, what's that data, and remember any of that stuff. 30 seconds. So when you're practicing, when you're doing your role pulling, that time, start that timer, run it for 30 seconds and see how well you do. Practice, practice, practice. This can't just be something that teams are doing on their own. They really need to be doing this in front of other people so they get used to it and more comfortable. Perfect. So the question now comes, well, when should we use our success stories? We've worked really hard to simplify complicated, complex systems, and we've broken them down into simple format. So the question is when do we use them? And for that, we can start to look at our sales cycle. First and foremost, start with that lead gen. Think about this for yourselves. If you guys received an email with 4 sentences that talked about a problem that you've been currently having, that another site had been having, they solved it, you know what the data is, and now they left you with a question. Think about the power that could have for an outreach. We're solving for problems we know that they're going to have. We have proof because we've given that social proof that, hey, someone else had the problem, they solved for it, here is your opportunity, just walk through the door. This is a great way to do that. The qualification stage is also another area where success stories are going to be really helpful. Do these sites, do these companies that you're looking at prospecting, do they fit your other past successful sites, other clients? Are they having really great results? If so, qualifications is a great way to do that. Maybe this is where you find out that, oh, this isn't a good fit because it's too big. You're just going to do too much. It's just not going to work for us. But more importantly, this can get them excited. This can help self-qualify them because now they're like, man, I want those results. I don't know how this is going, so I want to make this happen for us. So that's where that qualifications can be really helpful. Oh, hit some more buttons. Awesome. So next area is those sales pitch and those demos. This is really where most of us are using these guys already. Pretty common technique for solutions is to have some sort of a story in there about how we worked with somebody, had these results. So this isn't really a surprise. Definitely want to continue and make sure that we're using that further. And the objection handling. This is a really great place. This is where we've got somebody on the line. They're getting ready to sign, but something just makes them a little nervous. That risk is coming up on them and they're like, I don't know if I want to be responsible for this. Don't worry. Take a deep breath. We worked with this company. We solved this problem. It was very similar to your problem, and we had this success. You can also have this success if we work with you. That's how we're getting them comfortable. That's how we're really using that social influencing to mitigate that risk in their head and be like, oh, we've got this. And then closing. This is an interesting way. Get them excited about what they've done with you and the work that they've had so far. This is their opportunity to dream about what's going to happen from them for 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, 9 months down the road. This is a really cool way to just be like, hey, welcome to the family. We've got you on board. And don't forget, the success can be yours really soon too. And that's really the way that you can use success stories. It's not just a one-time sales demo side. Start sprinkling them around. Even before we get into this prospecting and lead gen, start having these conversations at the coffee stand. Start having these conversations at conferences. These 30-second sound bites are going to open doors in ways that other solutions, other case studies can't do. We have to get them to read the case study. And if we can't get them to read the case study, we can at least start talking with them from a point of view of leadership. Like, let's have these conversations. Let's get them excited about where we are and what we're doing. All right. And so this brings us to the questions. Shiloh, you asked a great questions about talking about leadership. We're talking about leadership of prospects. Who are we going to be talking to today? Who needs to sign this deal? Who's going to be the champion for us? Who's going to be the decision maker? These are the leaders that we want to be able to address, because these are the ones that make those decisions. So being able to talk to them in simplified language can be really powerful. Any more questions for me? This went much faster than I expected because I get nerdy and excited and talk too fast. So I apologize for that. So this is a great time for more questions. Anything you guys want to talk about? Simplifying some of that language. Now is a good time for questions.
We do have a couple in the QA section.
Perfect.
Jacob asks, any suggestions on how frequently we should swap success stories? Do you find that recent success stories are more impactful than the tried and true ones?
That is a great question, Jacob. And actually, I have not found a difference, and mostly because we don't do dates. It's really about relevance and what's happening there. I do recommend the swap as far as building out your success story library. So we built ours. We started working it in December, and now we have about almost 20 of them. And even at 20 from December, so we're like 5 months in, and I am so over all of ours. I am absolutely ready for some new success stories, which is why I recommend that quarterly sit down with everyone, talk about successes the company has had, and create a new group of those so that you can kind of see how that moves forward.
And we have a couple from Floyd. He asks, how does sales use these, the success stories, I believe, or the actual process in play? That's his question. That's one of his first questions.
Perfect. Floyd, that's a great question. So the sales team will often use these as they start to talk about some of those problems. So I've seen them use in discovery calls when they're first starting to have that interaction, and they're learning. When our salespeople are learning about some of those struggles, they can be like, oh, I know this problem, so we can use this success story. We can talk about that as well. So it's really throughout the process. Ideally, you want it to happen naturally. When does the conversation move to a spot where you have a solution for a problem that they've been having and you've worked for it with another company?
Perfect. And his second question, and how do we get permission from the companies you name? That has been a huge problem for them, actually using the company name.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's actually a problem that we have as well. You know, obviously not all of our clients are open to having their name. And that's where we talk about an industry wide. So we're talking about film sites, we're talking about athletic wear, we're talking about cosmetics. Keeping it high level can kind of help prevent you from having any sort of stepping on any toes or anything. Because the last thing we want to do is call someone out who's strictly told us not to call them out. So talking about the industry and being aware that what happens with one industry is probably also happening in the other businesses within the same industry. So it's not a big swap to not think that you wouldn't be able to talk about them at that level. Also, fun fact that we just had is negotiating for approval when you're starting about these processes. When you start talking about, hey, we had this success, before you sign that contract, you want something from us. We need something from you, which is permission to use you in a success story. That could be a really great opportunity for you to basically get what you need, as well as getting those clients through that sign-up line.
And his final question, how do you know this works?
This is such a great question because I used it firsthand. So skeptic, I am a skeptic. My 2-week break when I should be relaxing my brain was doing really complicated things. I was like, this is all going to be for nothing. I was wrong. It was amazing. So in a discovery call, I just threw it out there. We were practicing it. We actually hadn't even released it. I was like, let's just see what happens. And I did one. Lights and eyes, mouths open, silence. This was the first time that they had thought about the process in this way, that this was really a possibility for them, and which is really great. They were on board, moved through the process, but asking that question and getting them excited actually increased our ability to move the sales cycle faster, because they're like, I want those results for me. So how can I do that? How can I connect with that? Just try it out. You're going to be so surprised by how well people are like, oh, you simplified it for me. You told me what the data was. And now you got me questioning whether or not I've been doing things the right way or not.
We have one new question that just came in. Let me read through it. Would you make any recommendations on approaching clients and requesting them to work with you on building these use cases from your experience? Any approaches that are always successful? And they said you may have already went over that.
Yeah, I think we actually did not talk about reaching clients, because that's something normally, to your point, is usually something marketing and the salespeople get those permissions and then they go with them. But I think what's here is that working with your CSM, your account managers, to just talk blatantly, open about how well they've been performing and how you want to highlight how awesome they are. That feels good. When you're on the other side, when you're on the client side and your business is coming and saying, hey, you guys are killing it. You're doing really great with what we provided you. We'd like to tell others about how well you're doing. A lot of times those doors are going to be yeses, because that's really, it makes them look really good. They're going to go to their leadership and be like, hey, we're now being used as a success story because this is so successful for us. And I think that's going to help in a lot of ways. So just having those candid conversations, using your account managers, using your success managers to really find out who's open to having those conversations and who's open to sharing.
Perfect.
Awesome. Great questions, everyone. Anything else? Any last minute thoughts? Are you guys getting excited? You're going to do some success stories? Because I want to see them. I want you to share them with me. I want to hear all about it. And I want you to talk about how hard it was or how easy it is, if you're really good at simplifying some of that.
All right. So it looks like we answered all the questions. And I want to thank you, Leslie, for your awesome presentation. And now have some housekeeping things to go over. Cheers. Okay. We would like to remind everyone about our DEMOFEST game, where each session you attend and each session feedback survey you fill out gets you points to win some awesome prizes. As you can see the ones on the screen. I wish I could win, but I can't because I'm an employee of Consensus. I need some new AirPods. And we're also very excited to bring DEMOFEST on the road again as DEMOFEST X. We had a great time in San Francisco in March, and we are bringing the event to Dublin, London, and New York City later this year. You can register to join us at any of these events at demofest.com, which also is in the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. And we also encourage you to stop by our expo hall to visit our premier partners of DEMOFEST. Remember, there is no transfer of money involved in this event. So all of our partners here have gone above and beyond to contribute to making this event a success for all of you. And last but not least, thank you for joining us for 30 Seconds to Soul, crafting success stories that convert. And thank you to Leslie for that valuable insight and knowledge. That's a wrap for today's sessions. We hope to see you all tomorrow for our opening keynote with Gary and Hess at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. The session, it will stay open, but it'll stay open for the remainder of the time, and then it'll lead you into the next session, or it's going to close out since this is the last one. But again, thank you all, and I hope you all have a great day.